Hi everyone, thank you so much for attending this webinar today. For those of you who don't know me, I'm James Mitra, the founder of JBM. We are an executive search firm that partners with high growth disruptive businesses. So given what we do at JBM, we are acutely aware of how this pandemic has affected all of our lives in so many different ways. And over the last sort of few weeks, we've spoken to countless candidates, many of whom have sadly lost their jobs. Some have been placed on furlough, others have had offers withdrawn. And we know it's been a really stressful time for many people. But in spite of this, I think the lockdown has also given us all an opportunity to sort of step back from the day-to-day grind and use this time for some much needed reflection. So with that in mind, we wanted to set this webinar up to hear from two experts in Maddie and Dan about how we can use this time in lockdown for kind of effective career planning and hopefully come out of this situation ready to drive our careers forward with clarity and confidence. So Maddie and Dan are going to cover a couple of topics or a few different topics over the next sort of 20 minutes or so. And then we will have a chance to do a Q&A. So please feel free to submit any questions over the course of the webinar. And at the end, we will do our very best to cover as many of those as we can. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Maddie and Dan to introduce themselves, tell you all a bit about their backgrounds, and we will go from there. So Maddie, I'm going to hand over to you first, if that's okay.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. My background has mostly been in HR and organizational development. I've worked in what's been described as an eclectic collection of industries over the last 20 years, but all roles have sort of been very much focused in organizations that have growth, and all roles have been very much centered around people. In the last 5 years, I've been doing that by myself, so set up as an independent consultant, doing coaching, executive coaching, leadership development, and other good stuff like that. And currently Chief People Officer for Lantum, who are a health tech.
Fantastic, thank you, Maddie. Dan, do you mind doing the same, just introducing yourself?
Absolutely, thank you so much for having me, James. Really appreciate the invite. So my name is Dan. Up until December last year, I led the people and talent function at Drover, which is a car subscription marketplace, startup, scale up, I guess, at this point, for about 4 years. Before that, I actually had a bunch of operating and commercial roles in a few tech companies, including Lyft, which is a competitor to Uber in the US, where I was an early employee helping them expand to new markets. And then in an even earlier life, I was a corporate lawyer. So it's taken me a while to arrive at people and talent, but I'm here to stay now.
Awesome, and we're very glad to have you, Dan. Well, thank you both so much for giving up your time at this, what I know is a busy time for you both. It would probably be remiss of me not to at least start with COVID-19. I know, Dan, it's probably unfair to ask you because I know you're very recently into your role doing some consulting at Bulb and WeGift, but Maddie, do you mind telling us a little bit about sort of how Lantum have tackled this pandemic in terms of supporting your staff and what your biggest learnings have been? Because I know Lantum have been at the forefront of actually helping the NHS during this period, so it's probably been a particularly challenging and interesting time for you guys.
Yeah, great. And I guess maybe just to start with, for those of you who don't know us, we've been around since 2013, and our platform basically helps healthcare providers manage shifts in places such as GP surgeries, care centres, hospitals. We have about 20,000 clinicians registered on our platform and roughly 2,000 organisations who are using it. So as you can probably tell from that and from what James has said, yes, we are at the kind of forefront of trying to help in this crisis in terms of really trying to help to get clinicians in the right places at the right time. Having said that, like, all organizations, and particularly in the startup world, we are also facing kind of challenges with that in terms of how we kind of ensure that we're focusing on the right things, and that we've got the right people in the place to do that. We have taken advantage of the government's job retention scheme, and we have sort of had to put some, some cost saving measures in place, just so we can really ensure that we come out the other side of this as well.
Yeah, I guess for anyone that's listening to this, it's been challenging, I think, for everyone's businesses, and a lot of owners have had to make difficult decisions. But I think people attending this webinar will, like me, are in lockdown, like you guys are in lockdown, and probably want to use this time to reflect on their career and think about what next. So Dan, if I come to you, what's your advice for people in this climate that are still very much looking to progress their careers and maybe at a bit of a loss as to how they can do that?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing that I would say is I would be quite cautious when thinking about these calls for extra productivity and all these articles telling us to pick up 10,000 new skills in this environment. And look, if you are fortunate enough to find the time to be extra productive and to do that, then great. If you are, however, struggling with the mental impact of isolation, or simply, not, still at odds with this new normal, then I would say just make sure you start with self-care and R&R. Just get the basics right. If you can, now is a great time to start thinking about new skills. Doing that extra course that you always hope to do, or pick up that language that you've been hoping to learn. But there's a lot of other things that you can do, I think, as well to progress. So if you're a manager, especially, I think now is an amazing time to practice how to lead a remote team. A lot of us have been leading partially remote teams, partially distributed teams for a while. Not very well, in my case, certainly. And now I think is a fantastic opportunity to really learn how to nail that, because this is not going away. It's very likely that in the future, your team at least partially will be distributed. So learning how to spread, culture and share that to your team, how to set goals in a remote environment will be key. If you're someone that's currently in a job and you've been promised a promotion or some sort of progression, I would say just be patient with your organization. Right now, customer behavior, whether your company is B2B or consumer, is out of whack. It's very difficult to plan for the future. Now, a lot of people are getting furloughed, laid off. It might not be the time to make that promotion happen. So just be patient, take care of yourself. If you can afford it, by all means, learn new stuff.
I think that's great advice, and I think that it's very true that there is a lot of pressure at the moment. And it's easy to get overwhelmed by all the things that people are encouraging us to do. And there is something to be said for just taking some time as well, and using the time to work on yourself. Maddie, what about yourself? What do you think about that?
I think I'd really like to echo Dan's first points there. When with so much uncertainty and being in a time of crisis, there's a lot of pressure on our system and our internal system to be able to kind of respond and survive in that. So I must admit to being rather amused in the early couple of weeks of this, learn a new language, learn a new skill, all of this kind of stuff. And that can be really quite challenging when, what you're facing kind of day to day is asking a lot of you. So I think in that respect, really be kind to yourself. And if you don't come out fluent in Italian and Java, that's okay. There are, to sort of come out of that, learn some stuff about yourself, have been able to kind of survive in that environment, I think is going to be really key. And I would also agree about looking around you and what's going on in terms of how you can really practice and hone skills. Maybe you're homeschooling as well as trying to work. Certainly, I'm not in that situation, but I have spoken to plenty of parents, and that's a really kind of challenging environment to be in. And so actually that's a whole kind of set of skills that you're learning and practicing there. You know, whether it's what's going on in your organization, if you are currently working, is there something you can kind of lend yourself to that you wouldn't normally be involved in? Certainly on with reduced teams, you may well find that in fact, you know, you need to put your hand to something that isn't normally in your job description, which is a great opportunity to kind of practice those things. I know, for example, Deliveroo in the very early days of this had everybody working on signing on new people. As we know, there's so much more on Deliveroo now than there was pre this crisis. And so actually kind of putting everybody into doing something a little bit different gives you a real opportunity to practice some different skills.
I think that's a really great point, Maddie. So for those people that are in a headspace where they're really keen to turn this uncertain time into opportunity, what are your advice for those that are really keen to be proactive in that respect?
Should I take that one?
Yeah, please
Sure.
do, Dan.
Yeah, I guess I think if there's been one learning over the past couple of weeks that I've picked up, it's that now is the time to build your brand, and whether that's your personal brand, your company's commercial brand, or your employer brand, now's the time to make or break it. I'm seeing amazing examples on LinkedIn of people offering their expertise, lending their skills to anyone who needs it, who might be out of a job. You know, that's something that will be remembered, and it's something really worthwhile if you can find the time to do it. If you're a company and your customers aren't spending any money right now because for whatever reason they can't, figure out what else can you do for them. I saw a couple of amazing examples the past couple of weeks. For example, this early stage startup called Pento does payroll for SMEs. And you know, they rather than kind of pushing their product and trying to get people to sign up, they created a furlough calculator for companies to use, and it was tremendously helpful for those that needed it. You know, I'm seeing companies like Carta and Go Carless release their response to COVID-19 strategy, how they communicate layoffs and such. I think these are all really great ways to show the world what you're really made of. On the other hand, it's also a great time to do really badly. So there's also examples of companies have done a really bad job communicating things like layoffs. And to make sure whatever you do, remember that what you do now will, is definitely going to, people are going to remember it. I think, if you are for the first time working remotely, you might not be super comfortable with asynchronous communication. So basically using tools like Slack and email rather than meetings and calls. Make sure you really learn that. What's Slack etiquette? How do you express emotion on Slack? What are the kind of new ways of communicating that are going to be so crucial in the future? I think learning those now and taking this opportunity is really important as well. Yeah, those are kind of my thoughts.
That's a great point, Dan. I think there's a lot to be said about the companies, that how they respond in this situation. It really is remembered, isn't it? Absolutely. Maddie, what do you think for those looking to turn this uncertain time into opportunity?
So I think we find ourselves in a really unique situation that can allow whatever situation you're in, lots of kind of skills to be practiced, right? What's kind of required from us, maybe it's the remote working, as Dan said. It's having to be very agile about decision making. It's having to lead people through uncertain times when you may be struggling with that uncertainty yourself. So I think, if you're in a position where you are working currently, I think a little bit like I said before, it's kind of getting involved with things that are a little bit different from your day to day. And, I'd agree with Dan, is really kind of practice that, make sure you've kind of, done the research or the reading to sort of really help yourself in that situation. I think also it's a good opportunity to be really clear on what are your long-term goals? What do you value? What are the skills that you really want to improve? And if you are perhaps furloughed or have perhaps been made redundant, and you have some time on your hands and you're really kind of, really motivated to look at that, is being clear on that end goal, because there is so much out there that you can do, whether that's signing up to free courses, of which, every kind of provider is putting them out there. Maybe it's about getting some coaching or mentoring. Again, lots of providers are putting stuff out there, getting involved in some volunteering, those sorts of things. I think is knowing at the heart of it, what do you kind of want at the end, is making sure that the things that you're choosing and you're saying yes to are connected with what you actually care about and where you see yourself going on the other side of this.
I really like that, Maddie. I think I read actually, I think there's a Harvard Business Review article which is came out in the last week around reinventing your career in times of crisis, and one of the things I really like was this concept about developing many possible selves. It's this idea that we all have these different things that we might want to be or could be, and this could be a well-informed idea, it could be very vague, it might even be a complete fantasy, but the article suggests that this is a great time to just explore and embrace the possibilities, to think about them, research them, speak to people, see what comes of it without putting yourself under undue pressure. But it's a good time to try, and I think there's something to be said for going into this with a positive attitude and possibly exploring things you wouldn't necessarily have maybe had the time to do so before. No, that's all great advice. Thank you. Dan, I just wanted to come to you in terms of specific skills that maybe anyone that's listening to this could be thinking about strengthening. You alluded to, for instance, sort of the Slack etiquette, things like that, new ways of working, which is actually a really good point, and one I hadn't thought of. But what do you think people could strengthen?
Yeah, so it's kind of the approach I would take is just think of what the world will look like post this pandemic, right? So how is your industry going to change? Everyone's industries are going to change in one way or another, some much more than others, but changes are coming, and set a vision that you think is most likely. Of course, there's a lot of uncertainty what's going to happen, but what do you think will happen? And then optimize for that, right? So I'll give an example. If you're in people and talent, which is of course where we are, there are a few areas that are now becoming obviously really important. One is knowledge management, again, internal comms. Make sure that you really think through what that's going to look like in the future. Even things like workplace setup. Is the open plan office still going to be a thing? And surely not in the short term, but perhaps not even in the medium term. If you're in talent, understand how employer brand and corporate social responsibility are converging, and what you can be doing as a company to, again, show the world the kind of company you are. So yeah, I guess that's the key thing. So whatever your role, whether you're a people manager or an individual contributor in a company, focus on what your industry or your world is going to look like in the future, and then really try and optimize for it.
Great, thank you, Dan. Maddie, what do you think on that question?
So I think start with yourself. Get to know yourself better. How are you responding in this situation? And how is that behavior then translating to the way you are with other people in your life, be that at work, be that with other people in your network? As I say, we're in a really unique situation, and that is affecting so many people, and it will be, it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? We're 7 weeks in, we've probably got a long way to go before we're back to any kind of level of normality. So, really getting to understand, some emotional intelligence, and that starts with us and our own self-awareness. I think also leadership is really key. You don't have to lead people. You don't even have to be working to provide some kind of leadership in a situation like this. So how can you hone in on those skills particularly? I'd agree around communication. I think that's a really key one to be practicing. And I think a little bit back to our last question as well is when coming out of this, it's how are you articulating what it is that you have learned? And that requires some self-reflection and some and actually kind of prior to that, I guess, some purpose about what it is that you're practicing, getting involved in, learning. You know, take that purpose, practice it, have some self-reflection about it, and be really great at articulating what that experience has brought you. And that's where I think, you know, I'd go back to that point about it. Use what's around you. If you don't kind of quite have the mental load or energy to be able to kind of really look into something new, use what's around you to go, okay, this is what I've learned from that, and this is how I can articulate what my experience was like. So when you are talking to prospective employers or your current employer about thinking about where you go next, you've been able to really neatly think about what this experience has brought to you and how it's changed you.
Great, thank you very much, Maddie. There will probably be people listening to this who have, because of the pandemic, been furloughed or are possibly facing redundancy. So definitely very stressful for a lot of people, and an uncertain sort of time ahead. So what advice do you both have for those who are in this situation, and what can they do at this time? Dan?
Yeah, so I think there's no escaping the reality that it's a tough market. I think a lot of great people have found themselves in a bad situation, and you know, companies are taking a more cautious approach when it comes to hiring. But I wouldn't necessarily be discouraged by that. I think there's a lot of things you can do to really stand out, and I think it starts with the fundamentals. So make sure that you've really thought through, and I think this is really echoing Maddie's point, what it is you're actually wanting to achieve in your career. If you know, is your current track the right track? So I think it's a great time to start with some reflection. Once you've done that and you're confident you know what you want to do, then I think, you know, go back to, again, the basics. So make sure that your CV and LinkedIn are top notch and up to date, and really focus on achievements and results rather than kind of like listing the to-dos that you've done in your previous job. And I think in a post-COVID world, increasingly we're going to be leading by results and by impact rather than sort of face time. So showing that on your CV and is really, really key. And I think still the significant majority of people don't do this. So it's a really great way to stand out. Apply strategically, you know, think through again, what companies are doing okay in this climate, what companies might even be benefiting in this climate, what companies are probably not doing particularly well, like travel. So be smart and thoughtful about where you're applying and where you're focusing. Now is a great time to reach out to folks on LinkedIn. You know, a lot of people are lending their expertise, their help, especially when you hand them an opportunity to help. A few people will say no. So if you see someone doing the same role that you're applying for at a company, now might be a great time to reach out to someone else doing that role already and get them on a call before your interview to learn about the company, the culture, what the expectations of the role are. A lot of people will be very happy to help. So I guess those are the concrete pieces of advice. Just one overarching one is, even though there's a lot of uncertainty now and it's a tough market, I think hopefully market will, there will be a bounce back post-pandemic, and it won't be back to pre-COVID times, but it will be a bounce back. And you know, if you can afford to take some time off, spend time with your family, reflect, or even do some contracting roles, maybe it's not the best time to jump into any role just because one is offered to you. You know, think about what you want to do, and sort of don't be discouraged by this craziness.
Great advice, Dan, and I think that's absolutely right. And I think your point around being proactive is a really good one at this time. We at JBM have been, you know, offering up free virtual coffees to people that want to talk about CVs and careers in general. And I've seen lots of other recruitment firms and talent professionals doing the same. I think there's a real willingness out there to help each other at the moment. And I think that's something to really make the most of for those that want to. Maddie, what are your thoughts on advice for people that might be in this situation at the moment?
Yeah, so firstly, to anyone who is listening who is in that situation, you know, I'm sorry to hear that, because it's you know, it's happening to a lot of people, and you know, from that perspective, it's a really challenging time, and the experience will be different for each of those people, whether that's sort of on the positive end, as I heard from someone today, and I'm really looking forward to having some time off after so many years, or whether it's on the other end of the scale and actually kind of feeling really troubled by that. And I think the other thing I'd like to say up front is it's not personal, right? This is a sign of the times, and in fact, pre the last financial crisis, you know, redundancies were something which were a bit of a taboo and weren't really talked about. Whereas I think now the changing landscape has meant that you know, people will start to see not just one redundancy potentially in their career, but more of those. And then I think it's kind of break it down into what you need to focus on. So is that you actually kind of need to process how you feel about that first, and how do you plan to do that? Is there someone you can reach out to talk to about that? And then thinking on a very practical level, what's the implication for you financially? How can you make sure you're kind of clear about what the plan therefore needs to be, and when you prefer to be back in work, and sort of get very kind of practical about it and be clear on those things. And then I think, you know, absolutely, as some of those things Dan said, is do you have time therefore to have a bit of a reflection and think about what you're getting into, and really kind of think more strategically about, right, who is going to be, who is likely to bounce back out of this, what sort of areas, you know, is there an opportunity to gain some skills in the meantime, so that you're kind of ready when that bounce back happens.
Thanks, Maddie. Yeah, I think just another thing that has come up that I've seen from candidates is actually if you are the sort of person that just wants to be out there doing things and are getting frustrated at the fact that maybe the job market is going to be much slower, then I think there are loads of opportunities, whether it's volunteering, sort of pro bono work, advisory work. We've seen some great initiatives in the startup space around meals for the NHS, helping with PPE equipment. There is so much out there that you can actually make a real difference to people's lives and help the country get back on its feet. And there is opportunity if you want to find it. And I think all of these sorts of experiences can give you stories to tell when it comes to interviewing, when you get to that point, and showcase some of those qualities and skills and characteristics that employers find really appealing. So there is opportunity out there for sure. And we just kind of come on to our last question before we've had some questions come in from those listening. And it's just around a topic that's very dear to my heart, given we have a podcast called the 40-Minute Mentor. Mentorship's something that I think is really, really important at this time. So Dan, how do you think mentors can help their mentees that are currently looking to make a career move in these sort of challenging times?
Yeah, so I think like through coaching fundamentally, so help them think through what they really want to achieve, and what the ways to get there are, right? So if someone's, say, a management consultant and wants to quit and become a product manager, you know, is right now the best time to do that? It could be, but it could also be that, you know, taking a product focused project within your consulting job is going to set you up for more success and more options to choose from in terms of jobs 3 months from now. So help them think through, again, help them self-reflect and think through the options that exist to get where they want to go. You know, help them from your perspective highlight the skills that they need to really hone in on right now in order to get there. How to sell those skills as well. You know, thought leadership. You know, perhaps now's the time to write an article, and sort of helping them through that. And then of course leverage your network. And I think if you're a mentor, you're probably, you know, quite a bit more senior in your career. You'll have a broader, deeper network of people. You know, now is a great time with all the community spirit that LinkedIn's experiencing to make introductions to help where you can.
Great. Maddie, did you have anything to add there?
Well, coaching's at the heart of everything I do. So yeah, I would certainly agree with that. I think it's really important for mentors to check in with mentees about what it is they really need from that. So contract up front. Do you just need a listening ear? Do you need some advice? Do you need some coaching? Do you need some feedback on your CV? You know, is it practical support? Is it emotional support? What is it that they need? And I think, given how much things are changing day to day, that will be different from people for day to day. So whatever you agreed at the beginning of your relationship with the mentee may well be different now. So it's making sure that, you know, each time you're connecting is, okay, what's this for? What's going to be the best use of our time? How can I make sure that you walk away from this feeling like you've got what you need?
Yeah, great. And I think it's clearly mentorship is something that we could all benefit from. And I think if you're listening to this and you don't have a mentor, now is a perfect time to reach out to people, you know, in your network that you trust, that you know, are inspired by, or that you just think could help you at this time. I think if there's one thing that I've learned from the last year from running the podcast, is just how powerful it can be, and how we all will benefit from it. So if you haven't got one, definitely do it. And if you do have if you also fancy being a mentor yourself, then offer it up, because I think we could, you know, it's very much a two-way process, and something that you can learn a lot from being a mentor too. Well, thank you both so much. We've had some questions come in, so I'm just going to pull these up now. Don't know who wants to take this one first, but what advice do you have for teams that are trying to keep furloughed staff members engaged? It's a really good question, because it's a situation we've never really had to contend with before. Maddie, maybe if you take that one first.
So I think it's about kind of making furloughed staff feel that they are still part of the team, right? So, you know, they are not working currently. We're not allowed to talk to them about work, and there are some rules around that. However, that doesn't mean that they are not still part of the team. So whether that's keeping them engaged with social things that you might be doing, everybody's doing online quizzes and bingo and all sorts of things kind of virtually, so making sure you're still inviting them to those things, keeping them updated with news. So we're sending out our newsletter, and giving them, you know, an update on what's going on with the business as well. And as managers of furloughed staff, I think it's really important to make sure that you are checking in, and, you know, agree the kind of length of time with the individual, but checking in with them personally to see how they're doing, and you know, and what's going on for them.
Great, thank you. Dan, did you have anything to add, or perhaps looking at it from the other angle, what somebody that has been furloughed, how they can stay involved, and things that they can do in this time?
Yeah, I mean, I would just honestly echo Maddie. I think it's about making them feel part of the team and over communicating. So making sure, keeping them up to date, making them feel safe. I think, you know, doing much more of that than you think they need, because the more you do, the better. So that's really the key thing. If you are yourself furloughed, I would say, again, like do the other part of the equation. Stay informed, participate where you can, where you're allowed, and at the same time, you know, enjoy this opportunity to do all the things we've just talked about. You know, reflect, take time out, spend time with your family, pick up a new skill if that's something you feel like doing. I think those are all really great options.
Great, yeah. Completely concur. Another question we've had from Hannah, so thank you, Hannah, is around really around CVs. So how can one boost their CV or improve their CV during this pandemic to give them a better chance, sort of post COVID? What are both of your advice for CVs? Have you got any pointers around what typically stands out to you when you're hiring?
Yeah, so I would say I went through this exercise myself actually a couple of years ago, when I realized that my CV was just, it was 20 years of me adding bits, taking out a statement, you know, you just sort of how you keep kind of tweaking it a little bit. And I actually went and got some outside help on it from a CV writer to sort of help me do it. But really what that was about was stripping it back to what is it that I really want to represent of myself. And being really clear that actually I don't need to get all of those experiences in. You know, CV is about getting you in the door, right? It's representing something cool and interesting about yourself that says to an employer, yeah, I really want to talk to you. And so it really doesn't need to contain everything. It just needs to contain the relevant things for where you're applying. And I think along with that is therefore tailor it. Who are you applying to? Who are you representing yourself to? And actually, what of your experience would be best for them to see in it?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you both. Great advice there for anyone. Also,
yeah, maybe just a few points. So I think
yeah,
I'm totally echoing Maddie. I think, and I genuinely think that having a greatly structured CV is like half the battle won. So it's really important to get it right. So I would say keep it tailored, and hopefully no more than 2 pages is the rough recommendation that I have. Make sure that it's structured and you use things like bold and italic and things like that to really get people to pay attention to the things they need to be paying attention to. Make your CV look attractive. It's an odd thing, but really it is important. Focus on achievements and results again, rather than just sort of walking the reader through the kind of things that you would do on a day-to-day basis. What did you actually accomplish? Make sure you explain the companies that you worked at. So often I struggle with CVs when they jump right into the to-do list or the achievements without me understanding what the company does. And it's very difficult to picture what those to-dos actually mean. To make sure you explain that as well to give people context. Those are kind of the key things. I'm very happy to help. If anyone wants to send me their CV after this, I'm very happy to take a look and give some advice.
Great, Dan. I'm sure people will take you up on that, and I offer exactly the same. I think the one thing from me, and I echo everything you've both said, is I always talk about impact with CVs. You really need, especially for senior people, hiring managers don't have a lot of time, and if they don't see what they want to see pretty quickly, it's quite likely that your CV will just get tossed to one side. So if you do have an opening summary or a short profile, I always talk about just make sure it's succinct, relevant, tailored, and you can signpost why they should keep reading, and then I echo all of your other points. But I think making it easy on the eye and grab the reader's attention, I think, is super important. We've got a couple of final questions. This one's just come in. Do you have any advice for people looking to switch industry completely during this time, especially if it's not possible to pick up some of the skills in your current role? So yeah, Dan, do you mind giving us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think look, if there's any way to pick up work in your current role, then try that, I would say. If there really isn't, then it's a perfect time to take a step back and find a way to learn those skills externally, right? No one's going to question why you took 6 months out to do something completely different during this time. So even if after 6 months of retraining, you realize you actually want to go back to your old career because this new thing isn't what you thought it was, that's perfectly fine. And no one, not that anyone ever minds, but this time especially, people would have a tremendous empathy. So that's kind of what I would say. If you think that it will be difficult to make the switch in such a tough market, then I guess that is your answer a little bit. So, perhaps give it a couple months and just learn on the side rather than trying to switch today.
Yeah, great advice, Dan. Maddie, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
I think I'd throw a little caution out there because I think it can often feel in a time like this, oh, great, let's just throw it all out and kind of start something new. And I think, how practical is that for you? So do you have, because perhaps, you ended up with quite a nice redundancy package, do you have time on your hands to explore something new? The reality will be, given that people are being made redundant, that as we start to come out of this, people who already have a significant amount of experience and skill in those roles is likely to be looked at first as opposed to someone new, right? That's just a reality of the kind of climate we're in. And also back to my earlier point about do you have the emotional energy and bandwidth to be in that place, or actually is there some comfort in the known and choosing the opportunity to really hone your skills in the known, and make sure that you're kind of a sort of, you know, standout candidate when people are re-employing.
Thanks, Maddie. And our last question comes from Phil, who thanks you both for really great insights. And he said that he's been made redundant recently, and it was great. He said it was great to hear that you both talking about honing personal skills and adding more strings to your bow. So with this in mind, he asks, what would your advice be in diversifying your existing skills to apply to roles that aren't necessarily in line with your current experience? Who wants to take that one?
Just say that last bit again. So the diversifying the skills.
I think it's taking those existing skills and,
yes.
and putting them in, maybe if he's looking at different avenues at the moment, you know, how can he do that to best effect?
Yeah, so there's something about, I think that kind of speaks to me about transferable skills. So yes, you might be looking down different avenues, but actually really dissecting your to say, you know, how does this apply kind of elsewhere, right? And you know, I do this a lot with mums returning to work after perhaps having a period of bringing up young children. You know, there's examples in there of the logistics it takes to organize, you know, a family, or it's thinking about your skills in a really different way. So what have you got that's there already that actually really applies to whatever that industry is that you might be looking to move to, and put those at the forefront. You know, I think, you know, in some instances, yes, it's really important that you have the education in that particular job, or you have some experience in that, but in others it's actually, you know, can you demonstrate leadership skills? Do you have emotional intelligence? Do you have kind of examples of how you've dealt with tricky situations, or made tough decisions, or worked in an agile way? You know, these things can often apply whatever the kind of industry or role.
Yeah, maybe just to add something very concrete. So I think this might be a great example of when a great cover letter is helpful. So if, you know, if you've got a set of skills that you think are transferable, and that story probably needs telling, because again, hiring managers, recruiters don't have a lot of time, so they may be, you know, looking for a specific title on your CV. If it's not there, they're going to flick through it, but they are going to have a look at your cover letter if it's, you know, if it's there, and if it's well structured. So I would say, tell that story. How are these skills that you've currently got relevant for this new role? It's another opportunity to really leverage your network, and again, try and see how people on LinkedIn and in the community can help. So basically, back to the same point I made earlier, but kind of amplify that.
Great. Thank you both so much. It's been I myself have found it incredibly beneficial, and I'm sure all of those listening will have done as well. It's yeah, really much appreciated. So I hope everyone that's listening has taken a lot from it. We will be putting this on our website as well, and sharing it for those that might have friends, family, or colleague that would find this conversation beneficial. But a huge thanks for everyone that's taken the time to be on this, and a massive thanks as well to Maddie and Dan for your time and expertise. It's much appreciated.
Thanks for having us.
All right,
thank you so much.
Take care. Stay safe, everyone. Cheers.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.